As Russia continues to suffer an economic downturn, China has pledged to show its support. A possible solution proposed by Beijing's commerce ministers would be to boost trade in the Chinese yuan. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi told reporters that if the Russians need it, they'll provide the necessary assistance within their capacity. Yi also added that Russia has the capability and wisdom to overcome the existing hardship. The proposal to expand the use of the yuan in trade with Russia would mean a 10% growth in trade between both countries. Joining us over the phone to discuss this is political analyst Martin Summers. Now, China has pledged to support the ruble by increasing trade in the Chinese yuan. How successful will this prove to be in lifting the current economic crisis in Russia?
Well, I think in the long term, obviously, that is the way to go for both countries, and that's clearly the case, that both leaderships see that that's what they need to do. The crashing oil price as a result of the Saudi Arabian price war, that actually helps the Chinese because, of course, they need a low oil price. So that should stabilise their economy a bit, although they have, of course, got their own problems. And in the long run, that's probably the way to go. But the real danger, of course, is that the Russian economy, in 1998, when the Russians defaulted on their international debt, that caused a major crisis in the West. Long-term capital management, the hedge fund collapsed, and that caused one of the early shocks in the financial system. And of course, the Russian economy going down has implications for the German economy, which has implications for the Eurozone. And on top of that, of course, the fracking boom in the US is dependent upon a high oil price. And if that bubble bursts, that will go straight back into Wall Street. So I think in the long run, the development of what the Chinese call the Silk Road from China through Central Asia and on to Germany, they want Germany to be part of this new configuration, is a positive development. But in the short run, of course, you can't change existing trade patterns that quickly.
So, I mean, how soon is it likely to happen that we have this trading in yuan, and how will this affect the dollar's influence worldwide?
Well, I think step by step the dollar is losing its influence, and this, of course, is what this crisis is all about. The crisis in the Ukraine has been largely manufactured by NATO intelligence services to make the Western Europeans in particular tie them into the traditional architecture, the Euro-Atlantic integration. And of course, doesn't actually make a lot of sense for the Europeans to be tied in that way. They should be intermediaries between the Americans, the Russians, and the Chinese. But of course, it's the Eurozone that's going to suffer the most from this. I think anybody sitting in Poland or Germany watching the Russian economy in trouble and being satisfied about it, as Donald Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister, seemed to be the other day, that is idiotic. I mean, essentially, the Russians. The East European economy and the German economy does depend upon the Russians being stable. So destabilizing them doesn't make an awful lot of sense.
Now, Russia and China share key interests in maintaining stability in Central Asia and deterring US influence. How significant will this change in currency transaction be in regards to this?
Well, I think it will be significant, but it's been coming for a long time. There was a big deal that Putin signed the other day. Of course, they've been putting off signing it, but of course the crisis in the Ukraine forced them to get their heads together. The other important development, which you haven't pointed out, is that the South Stream gas pipeline that was going to come up through the Balkans, through Bulgaria, up into Austria, that has been killed off by the EU. And the Russian response to that was to say, well, right, we're going to reroute that pipeline to Turkey. And that's got very big geopolitical implications. The Turks are now considering joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And of course, it's the Turkish military that have been supporting the uprising in Syria, with the Russians supporting the Assad regime. So that suggests that a rapprochement between the Turks and the Russians is on the cards. And if that did take place, that would certainly frustrate US designs.
Now we know that President Putin has forecast that the ruble will bounce back within 2 years. How realistic is this, and is it more likely to happen sooner with the support of China?
Well, as I say, in the long run, these countries will develop better and better relations because it just makes absolute sense for them to do. In the short run, you can't just magically change existing trade patterns. So there's undoubtedly going to be some pain in Russia. And I'm afraid in these circumstances, with the international financial system as fragile as it is, there's not going to be a painless transition from the dollar regime to a new regime. The likely outcome when you have these transitions, as in the 1930s, is that you get major financial turbulence all over the world, not just in Russia.
Martin Summers, political analyst, thank you very much for joining us today.